The downing of Russian drones by Dutch F-35 fighters over Poland in September 2025 was, on the surface, a straightforward tactical victory. Hostile unmanned aerial vehicles violated NATO airspace and were intercepted and destroyed. Yet, as soon as the details emerged, commentators, analysts, and policymakers found themselves debating whether this was truly a victory, or rather a demonstration of NATO's strategic vulnerability. The controversy stemmed not from the fact of the interception, but from the cost. A Russian drone costing perhaps $10,000 or $15,000 was destroyed by a missile that may cost anywhere from $400,000 to nearly $3 million, depending on the accounting method. This apparent mismatch highlights one of the most significant dilemmas of modern air defense: the economics of asymmetric warfare. Russian use of Shahed-type drones, sometimes rebranded as Geran, is by now familiar. They are cheap, mass-produced, and designed not to be individually decisive, but collectively disruptive. Slow, noisy, and relatively easy to detect, they are not survivable in a one-to-one contest against advanced fighters or surface-to-air missile systems. But when launched in large numbers, they complicate defense planning, saturate radars, and force opponents to expend valuable interceptors. They are also psychologically potent. A swarm of drones buzzing toward a civilian area or a critical military installation demands a response, no matter how disproportionate the cost may be. In Ukraine, these drones have been used to harass cities, degrade air defenses, and force Kyiv to adapt by developing layers of cheaper counter-UAV measures. For NATO, the September 2025 incident was a wake-up call. Dutch F-35 fighters scrambled to defend Allied airspace did what they were designed to do: identify, track, and destroy hostile targets. They fired Sidewinder missiles, most likely the AIM-9X variant, whose unit procurement cost is often listed around $400,000, but which can be higher depending on contracts, sustainment, and integration. Some outlets quoted the figure of $2.8 million per missile, which seems exaggerated but still conveys the core problem. Every engagement represents a massive cost disparity in favor of the attacker. From the perspective of air combat doctrine, the fighters performed flawlessly. From the perspective of economic sustainability, this was a Pyrrhic form of efficiency. The underlying issue is not simply financial, it is strategic. If Russia can continuously probe NATO's eastern flank with cheap drones, forcing alliance members to launch multi-million-dollar aircraft and fire expensive missiles, then Moscow has created a form of attritional warfare without even crossing the threshold into open conflict. Each drone, even if destroyed, achieves a measure of success by imposing cost, consuming attention, and revealing weaknesses in Allied defense planning. In other words, the very act of forcing an F-35 to launch and shoot is a minor victory for Russia. Ukraine's experience is instructive. For more than 2 years, Kyiv has faced relentless drone attacks and has learned not to respond with expensive interceptors whenever possible. Instead, Ukraine has relied on a patchwork of cheaper systems: old anti-aircraft guns firing proximity-fused shells, man-portable air defense systems, electronic warfare jammers, and even improvised methods like small drones used to intercept incoming Shaheds. This layered defense is imperfect, but it reduces the cost imbalance and preserves high-end systems for high-end threats like cruise missiles or aircraft. NATO, by contrast, has not yet invested heavily in such cost-effective counter-UAV solutions. The alliance remains oriented toward the traditional model of air defense, where expensive fighters and surface-to-air systems are justified against expensive hostile aircraft. The political dimension of the Dutch response should not be overlooked. By summoning the Russian ambassador, The Hague signaled that the drone incursion was not merely a technical incident, but a violation of sovereignty. This matters The legitimacy of NATO rests not only on its ability to fight, but also on its ability to uphold international law and norms. Yet, here again, the message cuts both ways. Russia can claim that with a handful of cheap drones it managed to trigger diplomatic outrage, scramble fifth-generation fighters, and generate negative press about NATO's cost-effectiveness. That is a significant return on investment for a relatively trivial material outlay. For the Netherlands, the timing is sensitive. The country has recently embarked on a major expansion of defense spending, pledging to devote around 3.5% of GDP to core defense outlays and an additional 1.5% to resilience and related fields. It has ordered 46 Leopard 2A8 tanks, scheduled to be delivered by 2028, reversing decades of neglect in armored capabilities. It is also playing a leading role in NATO's new financial mechanisms to support Ukraine, including the Priority Ukraine Requirements list, to which The Hague has already contributed €500 million. Against this backdrop of ambition and commitment, the image of Dutch fighters firing million-dollar missiles at cheap drones risks undercutting the narrative of strategic competence. What then are the lessons? First, NATO must accelerate the development and deployment of dedicated counter-UAV systems. This includes everything from modernized anti-aircraft artillery to directed energy weapons to electronic countermeasures. The technology exists, but the alliance has been slow to institutionalize it as a core mission rather than a niche concern. Second, NATO should adopt a more flexible doctrine that distinguishes between high-value threats and nuisance attacks. Not every drone warrants the launch of an advanced fighter aircraft. Sometimes cheaper ground-based systems or even civil defense measures may be more appropriate. Third, the alliance must recognize that cost is itself a domain of warfare. A battle won at ruinous expense can be strategically harmful even if tactically successful. To be clear, the Dutch pilots were not wrong to fire. They acted within the logic of immediate defense: protect Allied airspace, neutralize the intruder, eliminate risk. The problem is that NATO has not yet provided them with the tools to do so in a cost-effective way. Asking a fifth-generation stealth fighter to shoot down a garage-built drone is like asking a brain surgeon to swat a mosquito with a scalpel. The task can be accomplished, but it is hardly efficient. Until NATO resolves this mismatch, Russia, and potentially other adversaries, will continue to exploit the gap. In conclusion, the September 2025 incident should be understood as both a tactical success and a strategic warning. The Netherlands demonstrated commitment to NATO defense and the operational effectiveness of its F-35 fleet. Yet it also exposed the unsustainable economics of relying on exquisite platforms to handle trivial but persistent threats. This is the paradox of modern warfare. Technology designed to dominate peer adversaries can be undermined by cheap, expendable systems that exploit cost asymmetry. Unless NATO adapts, it risks fighting tomorrow's wars at yesterday's prices. For the Netherlands, the lesson is clear. Leading on defense spending and procurement must be matched by leading on innovation in countering the most affordable weapons of our time.